Welcome to the 359. I'm Ben Fox Rubin.
I'm Alfred Ng.
Legislation to save net neutrality passed the Senate yesterday, thanks in part to a few Republicans crossing the aisle. But don't expect this to mean net neutrality, which are rules that prevent ISPs from blocking or slowing internet traffic from being back just yet. The legislation still has to go through the Republican-controlled House and get President Trump's signature. As far as it seems to me, that all seems pretty unlikely.
Yeah, I mean, yesterday when the vote passed, I had seen all across Twitter basically, oh, net neutrality is saved. We did it. But, there's still a lot more steps to go through here. But, I mean, it is a move in a direction, in a positive direction for, net neutrality.
It is a move in a direction.
So, I mean, what's next for them then?
The senators, the Senate Democrats were taking a bit of a victory lap yesterday. They're also claiming that this is going to create an additional amount, like a nice momentum boost that will hopefully encourage more Republicans in the House to actually go through and vote for net neutrality to show like, hey, this is what the people want. You were voted in to do this kind of thing. Look, that sounds like a nice argument. I don't actually know that that's actually going to work. Plus, President Trump, it seems to me, is super unlikely to actually go through and, sign this if it actually ever reached his desk, because he's the one that brought in Ajit Pai to become the chairman in the first place, and he's anti-regulation.
I mean, even if he didn't sign it, is there any way for Congress to basically force this through if they get like 2/3 of the vote, which, they barely even got more than half in the Senate?
That's a good question. I think they do need President Trump's signature on this one. There might be some sort of veto loophole, but I'm not. It's been a while for my physics class, so I'm not actually sure.
Physics?
Or sorry, civics class. It's Thursday, people. Either way, we'll see what changes actually take place when net neutrality rules are removed from the books on June 11th. So we've still got some time before that actually changes. Next, eBay is working on adding more personalization to its website. I went to a press briefing yesterday about this, where they set up this whole mini store called the Store of Ben. I can now retire as a tech reporter after getting this type.
Wait, they made that just for you?
They made it just for me, and that was the idea. Is that what you do is you take this like survey or questionnaire on eBay, which I know that doesn't sound like very cutting edge or impressive. You do a questionnaire, but eBay claims that they did a ton of work on the back end to actually start to surface a lot more stuff that you would find interesting if you just tell them a little bit more about yourself and your interests.
That's interesting. Only
that is
because
interesting.
It's like, I don't go on eBay every day just to browse for random stuff I might be interested in. That sounds like something that I go on Amazon for.
Right. And eBay is probably hoping you do that more often with them.
I specifically go on eBay just to find like cheap versions of things that I know I really want that like somebody else already owns. So.
Yeah, and a lot of people, I think, justifiably complain about eBay that it's a mess, it's disorganized, there's so much stuff there, and I don't know what to find. This is kind of them trying to answer that situation, and they've been trying to do that for years, trying to like organize the site a lot more.
Yeah, I don't know. It feels like they're trying to turn like the thrift store into like a Target.
Yeah, and
not into it.
Look, that might work. I don't know. I liked getting the Store of Ben. I'll just say that. Last, it's Global Accessibility Awareness Day, which focuses on making technology more usable for people with disabilities. Last week, I got a chance to check out a bunch of Apple's efforts in this space, including voiceover features for the blind. Our own Ian Schur today wrote about Microsoft's new adaptive controller built for gamers with physical limitations. Either way, this sounds very positive, and it's nice to see these tech giants trying to make some of these efforts.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, if you want to read more about these stories, check us out on CNET. I'm Ben Fox Rubin.
I'm Alfred Ng.
Thanks for listening.
Now, to be fair, we did have a bit of a special plan for today that has absolutely fallen through by a person who will remain nameless.
Wait, what? We're not going to call him out by name? That seems ridiculous.
For those aware of the CNET history, you'll be familiar with an old program once upon a time known as the 404. We did have a special guest lined up today, and the jerk's on a bus right now.
I'm sure he's not that happy about it either.
I thought we were just going to go with that we couldn't find him because it was episode 404. I mean, I'm all for making fun of people being on buses. if we want to do that,
It sounds appropriate to me, right?
broke loser, get a Uber.
Ouch. Anyway, as per
Either way,
usual,
we had this situation lined up for like a good week beforehand, and we're pretty excited to have episode 404 with the 404 guys or the 404 guy. But it didn't work out. That's okay. That's live shows. That's podcasting. So
Either
and
way,
luckily,
if you get
luckily we had stuff to talk about otherwise.
if you get a chance, give Jeff hell on Twitter.
Oh, that would definitely be
That'd be a good motivator.
Yes, please fly my pretties. I know who you are. People that watch the show pretty regularly, go find Jeff Bacalar and trash him on Twitter for us. That would be amazing.
Please destroy his DMs.
that would be pretty fun.
So I'm jumping back into the chat right now, looking for questions and comments, and I think it's safe to say we could expand a little more on net neutrality because this is a dense issue that's going to play out over a long time, no matter what way it swings at this point. But it was a nice little shining beacon of hope for those of us who are proponents of net neutrality maintenance to see that vote pass yesterday.
Yeah, there were like only 3 Republican senators that went across the aisle for this one.
Yeah, but that's usually how this horse trading works, is that you really only need like 1 or 2 to get it over the line. So generally, you send as few of your people over as possible so that not as many people are at risk when they are actually up for election. That's generally how I've seen it. So and then they always claim this stuff where they were like, well, I wasn't sure until the vote was actually happening. I'm like, give me a break. You knew exactly what you were doing.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit more about that Xbox controller that we ran out of time to talk about on the podcast.
Absolutely.
So I did a story that was very similar to this for Tech Enabled about a year ago, but this is more so about like outside efforts to make controllers specifically for gamers based on their disabilities. That like,
this was a guy you talked to in DC who played what was it, Street Fighter?
Yeah, but he's from Texas. But the company that like sponsors him and makes the controllers for him, they're based in DC,
Gotcha.
North Virginia, more accurately. But yeah, to see a company themselves be the ones to make this is insanely cool. Like I said, like so there's companies that like one of the companies I spoke with, Able Gamers, they make these controllers. Like they visit them and they see like what their needs are, and then they have to go like extremely out of their way to like one of the controllers that I found that they made was they found these like really old parts that were only made like in like 2001 to 2003, and then he bought like their last stock because the company's no longer in business anymore, so he buys like their remaining stock that they still had like more than a decade after they went out of business, and then he used that to basically make these controllers. And he's not like making any money off of this. This is more for like as a nonprofit or like a charity. So it's incredibly cool to see, Microsoft themselves be the ones to make this, because then, they're not in short supply. You don't have to really go out of your way to make something like this. It's really awesome that they're doing stuff like that.
Yeah, and the adaptive controller, by the way, is $99. So, to me, that seems like look, that's not a little bit of money for a controller, but at the same time, the expense that goes into creating some of this stuff is probably significantly more than that, and the base of customers is probably considerably lower.
Yeah, especially so what I've seen from companies like big game makers is that they usually make these changes on the software. Like it's never really like a hardware thing that they put out themselves, but on hardware on the software, like Uncharted is a really good example of this. So I think in the first game or something like that, they had an issue where it was like people that were colorblind really couldn't see that much. So in the next one, or they might have put a patch for it where like it changed the colors for it, so it was like dynamic enough that you could see everything. They have all these other features too, where like there's like parts of it where like you kind of have to like mash the X button really fast or something like that. So if you have a certain disability that won't let you do that, you can like turn on a mode that will like just get rid of that for you or anything like that. Yeah, so like I said, most of it is usually in software, but it's like really cool that they're coming out with like hardware solutions, which is usually the larger obstacle.
Yeah. I got a chance to talk to Apple about this. They say from their software, from their operating system perspective, they're constantly trying to add new features in year over year, every single year, to try to help people with different types of disabilities. I got a chance to talk to a Paralympian who uses the Apple Watch to track his workouts, and he's able to toggle between the Apple Watch because he's able to walk, but he has there's a cerebral palsy below his knees. He's able to walk, but not very quickly, so he's able to toggle between the Apple Watch's walking functions and also wheelchair functions, so he can kind of keep all of his workout information and all of his movement information in one place, which I thought was pretty cool. And he does it at like a very high level, where like he's been in the Paralympics in 2012 and 2016.
Yeah, it's always nice when you get to cover a story that's actually endearing and positive.
Yeah,
It's rare, but it's nice.
it happens.
Yeah. Let's jump into the chat and take some questions. Actually, let's start with a poem. Michael Hazel says, Republicans are red, Democrats are blue. Neither of them care about you. Your money has more power with private entities. Screw net neutrality. I'm actually impressed with that. That was a pretty good rhyme scheme.
Wouldn't disagree with that poem either.
Yeah, he's got some points in there.
Yeah.
However, some of us are still proponent of it. And where do we fall, specifically us here? Let's editorialize for a second. We're trying not to get too personal about it. I'm not so paranoid personally about the services having my information because, hey, spoilers, they already got it. It's more about the potential for abuse and the restrictions of access that make me nervous. With the a la carte and streaming media these days, it's already difficult enough trying to maintain the different streaming channels you want to keep. And if they're going to put extra barriers up in front of that, when you live in a place like I do and you don't have choices for service providers, that really sucks.
Mm-hmm.
That's my biggest concern as a consumer.
As a consumer, I mean, like, look, also, I think I've been pretty open on the show that I've been more skeptical about net neutrality rules in the first place. And I'm definitely interested to see what happens on June 11th, because there are certain people that argue that the sky is going to fall and there are going to be all these changes. And I think any changes, if they do happen, are going to be fairly gradual. But the idea that ISPs are going to be blocking websites or some of the other nightmare scenarios, I don't personally see that in the cards, but I've been wrong about all sorts of things. So I can understand why a lot of people would want to argue, very strongly to try to protect these types of things, because they think that it is entirely possible.
Yeah. So after the Senate vote passed yesterday, I received a statement in my inbox from FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr, which I'm trying to hear him out on on his argument, but I'm also I don't understand why net neutrality would block that. Where he's saying that we're fighting for better, faster, and cheaper internet access by cutting through all this red tape that net neutrality brings. And I mean, I still don't understand how net neutrality essentially blocks that. But if you want to leave a comment telling me why net neutrality is all this red tape that is blocking us from cheaper and faster internet, because I really don't see that happening when if net neutrality does die, all of a sudden your internet bills are going to be way cheaper and faster. That just doesn't seem like...
On the flip side, they're also not going to automatically just get more expensive.
Yeah.
And, this is the kind of thing that's obviously going to be a gradual burn. But we're all entitled to have our own biased opinion. Again, I've had a really, really bad, long-running history with a certain service provider that I will not name here.
CNET.
We all have.
Yeah. Yeah, everybody's got their own horror stories. But, I mean, as this has unfolded, I've tried to force myself to read more into the other side of it. And there is great potential for innovations and privacy and security improvements.
Well, the broadband providers
it's just ugly to watch it unfold.
The broadband providers clearly do not want the additional restrictions. You're going to create a law telling them how to run their business. Obviously, they're going to take the position that, no, we don't want this law. And they're going to make the argument that, look, you want to put a law in the books that you're not allowed to have a bear as a pet in your house. Why would that make any sense either? So they're probably viewing it, or that's their argument, is that they're viewing it the same way, is that you're putting unnecessary restrictions on us that don't actually belong anywhere.
Alex is also against net neutrality, stating that I don't want them making money off the info I have without my permission or benefit, and that's where I get upset. And that's another good point. I just like that we're keeping it civil. We've all got our own personal angles to come in on this.
Yeah.
So one thing,
It is shockingly personal, though.
Going
right?
back to the eBay story, by the way, eBay went out of its way to say, like, look, we're going to get this additional personalization info from you, but we're not going to sell the data. And initially, like maybe more than like 2 years ago or something, when I first started covering tech, I might have been like, oh, yeah, whatever. But like nowadays, everybody is so much more aware of what's being done with your data that I actually appreciated the fact that they wanted to highlight that, and they wanted to say, like, look, we're going to take more information from you if you're actually going to use this feature. We're not going to package it and sell it. We don't want to do that. So
Yeah, ISPs,
They want to make you a customer.
ISPs would make
them.
the argument that, you are giving them permission by signing up for their service and agreeing to their terms and conditions, but that's also something that Congress has been talking. I was, watching a Senate hearing yesterday where they talked about that, where they need to build better terms and conditions that protects consumers in the sense of, just because I want to use the internet doesn't mean that I'm giving you the right to tell everybody about what I'm browsing through and all this stuff. But yeah, I mean, that's always been the argument of ISPs. Like, hey, you're signing up for this. You agree to the terms and conditions. You are giving us your permission to sell this. And there is a lot of advocacy out there to change that.
I see we have a lot of questions.
Yeah, they're filing right on in. APEC and I are on the same page. I'm for net neutrality, but would it end up providing even more ISP companies? Where I live, I have one choice, Spectrum, and I'm paying a lot for a little. Kindred spirits.
Yeah.
Do we think that we could potentially see other better options for service providers come out of either side of this unfolding?
We've discussed this before on the podcast, aside from net neutrality, regardless of where it ends up going, there's a very significant expectation that 5G is going to help provide a lot more broadband service.
Precisely. And I think it might have been Alex in the chat who keeps pointing that out, and thank you for that. We are on board.
Yeah, and it's not going to be a year from now, by the way. So we are, if things really go south for customers related to net neutrality and things don't actually shake out the way customers want it to, it's not like 5G is all of a sudden going to show up on a white horse in the next year or two or so. So don't expect it to be right around the corner where we're all going to have all this additional competition and more options.
Yeah, it's just funny to me, like the thought of, all these like different ISPs that are like, oh man, I really wish I could give the world cheaper and faster internet. If only this net neutrality weren't there to stop us. Nah, like that's such an unrealistic scenario.
They're just sitting on these giant piles of money
and just
being like, I'd love to spend this money to give everybody such good internet.
We have all this internet, but we can't give it to people for free unless they get rid of this red tape. Come on, guys.
You're making good points. That's true.
Do you think discussions like this, net neutrality, are going to start becoming more prominent in, not to get into politics or not diving into that, but will it start becoming a more push-button issue kind of thing with campaigns? More prominence.
It seems to me that Democrats are definitely trying to play that card. They think that they're getting traction on net neutrality, and that's why they're saying, like, we've got momentum and we've got the public on our side, and we're going to try to, force the House to get involved with this. I mean, like, people are demonstrating in the street about this kind of thing, which, if you took a step back, that's kind of surprising. This is a really wonky FCC rule.
I mean, people really care about their internet access.
It's true.
Man.
It's true.
I'm not a paranoid person, but I really hate my service provider.
That's another big reason, is that people have very little trust of a lot of the service providers. So they think giving them back some power is not going to be helpful.
Yeah. Well, we'll make sure to stay with it as it unfolds. How would net neutrality affect people in Canada if we use USA services in other countries? Do they have to be abiding by USA law for the servers being used? We've talked about this. No, if this impacts the US, there is global reverberation to this, right?
There could be. There's certainly like some countries that have looked at strengthening their net neutrality rules because of what's happened in the US. But it's also like it's gotten really jumbled on a state level, where there are like more than a dozen states that are looking on adding net neutrality rules. There's also this whole effort going on in the courts too, where a lot of major internet companies are trying to force net neutrality rules to stay in place through different lawsuits. So it's just becoming like a big mess at this point. So if you're Canadian and get US, you're just as likely to know what's going on as like a U.S. customer, because it's probably going to get messier before it gets simpler.
I mean, if anything defines the global playground, it's the internet. Mm-hmm. Go figure. Cannot let Stringjoy's poem go without notice. The correct answer is Laurel. I'm hearing Yanni. Senate reinstating net neutrality. Ajit finds it funny.
That's pretty good.
That's not bad.
Well
We
done,
got some real
Stringjoy.
talent in the chat, guys. Thanks a lot.
CNET is now a poetry website.
Yeah, I could go for like a spoken word, like poetry jam kind of thing. Want to host a special episode of that?
We're literally doing that right now. Send in your net neutrality poems. We'll be here all day.
We'll read them off for you.
We'll read them as much as we can.
So let's go back to the uplifting side of the stories and talk about tech-enabled. Carlos Martinez says, I'm blind. You should tell Apple to make a true speed dial feature. That would be a nice inclusion. What are some other...
I can email them today. There's actually a blind PR person I was working with for the Apple story that I'm sure he'd be very interested to hear that insight from Carlos. So
Yeah.
I will send it to him after the podcast.
Thank you, Carlos. Do we know any other potential tech-enabled features that they are working on right now in concert with the smartwatch and what we brushed on before?
They don't really talk about future features, but they walked me through a lot of stuff. Obviously, when it's Siri's not really that great, but using Siri, especially for folks that are blind or have other physical limitations, making Siri or any voice assistant more powerful is obviously useful because you just do it via voice, and that can be really helpful. And you can operate your phone, operate small appliances in your house, potentially lock the doors. That's something that you could see as a positive for the smart home.
Yeah. Before we go, Alfred, I wanted to hear a little more about your experience with the gaming controllers and the people you spoke to there. That seemed really awesome.
Yeah. I wrote the story about a year ago. I didn't get to use any of the controllers, but I did see them getting used. It was really interesting. So there was one where it was kind of like this like floor pad kind of thing where you would put your foot on it and you would use that to like control back and forth, like look around in a first person shooter, because the way like she couldn't like basically turn and like it would hurt her wrist a lot. It's like to use the analog stick to like look around. So she would use that to look around on the floor and then like shoot with like her other hand, which like she had no problem using. So that was like another really cool feature of it. They showed one of the ones that like you controlled with your mouth.
Yeah, this
like,
Street Fighter guy is
Oh no,
one
that,
of the
that wasn't like a special controller though.
yeah,
that was
but like that was what I thought was super awesome. This is that this guy that you talked to is one of the best Street Fighter players in the world, right?
Yeah.
And he plays with his face.
Yeah, so he sets up like an Xbox controller and he key mapped it. So that was part of the software. Like you can change like, oh, punch can be like this button instead of like another one that's like harder for me to reach. And he like sets it up so he can play like really well just by playing with his mouth and his tongue. So like he'll use his tongue inside his cheek to like press certain buttons and stuff.
And he like totally owns people.
He's
doing
pretty good.
this.
I never got to play him, but I would definitely lose.
What was his player of choice?
Chun-Li.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a tricky player in general.
So the way so I actually play Street Fighter, and so Chun-Li, it makes sense because of like the way that she's played. So if you're playing with like a character like Ryu or Ken, it's like you have to do all these like different combinations and stuff. But Chun-Li's character is like a charge character where
Right.
you like hold back and then like you press forward for like dash forward and like attack, or you can like button mash the kick button for her like multiple kicks. So it makes sense that like there's a character like that he plays a character like her. I don't know who he plays in Street Fighter 5 now. I'm not even sure if yeah. So yeah, that was one of the other controllers. So that's something that you can like map like different keys, and she can put it anywhere she wants.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. So that's what I was talking about. That was like the parts that like he had to buy from a warehouse that like from a business that like no longer worked. And that is her husband with her who like that he spends most of his time like gaming with her. Like that's how they bond together. But it got to a point where she couldn't play that much anymore because her hand hurt too much, and that's the floorboard that she uses to like turn.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
sweet.
I'm personally just kind of curious. I almost want to try them myself. Like, I really want to try them to see how they.
Yeah, I mean, it's awful when you can't like do something that you love because of a disability or anything like that. It's like really cool that there's people out there building this for free for them, and now Microsoft getting into it too.
Yeah, one of the things that Apple also mentioned to me was that some of these features that they do develop for accessibility end up helping, just broadly like the community in general. So, for instance, inverted colors, which are used for people with visual impairments. Some people just turn that on when they're, going to bed, so like you don't get like a big white
Somebody
screen.
that I spoke with about that called that like the curb effect, where it's essentially, you know how like on the sidewalks, like there's like the parts that are flat that like it's easier to like push a wheel up toward, like for a baby stroller or anything like that, or like a bicycle. That was originally like mandated by law for people in wheelchairs, so it'd be easier to get them on the curb. But like they found that, by doing that, it made it so much easier for like everybody with wheels to get on. So like that's like exactly what your point is.
Yeah. As somebody who's pushed a stroller more than once, I'm definitely very thankful for that.
It is interesting just to see what can be included in the gaming experience. We see from the low level just how to game differently with a Wiimote, which kind of changed the game. And then we're seeing way more intensely amazing innovations with these devices here. I'm really interested to see where it goes.
Yeah.
We are just about out of time, but we got one more poem that came through from Matthew Datcher, a haiku. Net neutrality. Feel screwed by my ISP. Need internet choice.
That is
Beautiful.
very good.
Absolutely beautiful.
We will. Should we? Let's offer to read any net neutrality poem on air, as long as it's not dirty.
Yeah, we got to keep it kind of PC. So
Yeah. But anyway, are we done?
yeah, we are out of time.
I was trying to filibuster a little bit longer to see if Jeff gets here, but apparently not. This thus concludes our episode 404. Sans Jeff.
without the 404.
Yeah, it's okay. But, maybe we'll see you guys for episode 1404, and then we'll have Jeff on then. So
Just remember to light up his Twitter for us.
please do that.
We're depending on you. Hey, I did want to make one more quick mention. Tomorrow is National Museum Day. It's coordinated by the International Council of Museums and held every year since 1977. This theme day is dedicated to raising awareness and importance of museums. So if you get a chance tomorrow and through the weekend, go visit your local museum and get a little culture in your lives. I'm a big fan of the Natural History Museum. I've been like 7 times and I still haven't seen the whole damn thing, but I am a member.
Very cool. All right. The 359 podcast is available on iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, FeedBurner, Google Play Music, the Amazon Echo, and of course, CNET.com. Thanks everybody for watching, sending in your poems, sending in your questions, and we'll see you again on Monday.
Yo,
Take care.
Smash that ratings button on iTunes.
Don't forget to smash that like button.
Have a great weekend, everybody.